Hi, everybody, and welcome back to McNulty's Wild and Woolly Book Corral. June on the Range is coming to an end, and I want to read out again the list of the Posse members that Michael K. Vaughan listed for me, who are also doing June on the Range episodes this month. And let's take a look at that list one more time. Steve Donoghue, Book Time with Elvis, Another Bibliophile Reads, Reading This Life, CriminOlly, Randy Ray, Mystery and Mayhem, Books, Songs, and Other Magic, Jeff's Cave of Cool Books, and Genre Books. These are linked below as they have been all month. These are the Posse for Michael K. Vaughan, who created June on the Range as one of the great events that I talked about in the first episode of this month. So to conclude June on the Range, I wanted to do something different. We talk about books a lot, but we haven't really talked about films. So I want to, give a tip of the Stetson to the cinema of the Mythic West, which is equally as important to the Western genre as our pulp magazines and vintage paperbacks and novels and all of that. But rather than just talking about, everybody does the same things. We all know what the great Western films are. Tombstone with Kurt Russell and Val Kilmer, and, Rio Bravo, Shane, Winchester 73, The Lonesome Dove, miniseries, The Searchers, and on. These are all superb Westerns, highly regarded. But there's so many, between the late 20s and through the 1950s, there were thousands of Westerns made. So I picked a couple that I'm going to recommend to make sure I'm giving an acknowledgement to the cinema of the West. And I'm just going to talk about them briefly. I'm not going to go into plot details or any of that. But these are films that perhaps we don't talk about as often as we could. And we're going to start out with one of the best, one of my favorites, Roy Rogers. This is great. Okay, so a couple of years ago, they restored Roy's last film, which was Macintosh and TJ. And then they also restored Under Western Stars, which was his first starring role in a Western, which was 1938. So 1938 to 1975. Is that right? Yeah, 75. His first feature Western and his last. Now, what's interesting about these, this is a beautiful restoration for both films, by the way. Both are excellent films. These are contemporary Westerns. By that, I mean they take place in the era in which they're filmed. Now, Under Western Stars is probably confusing to you, as it should be, because when you get into the Westerns of Gene Autry and Roy Rogers from the 30s through the 50s, you're going to see anachronisms. For example, you have automobiles showing up in these films, and that's a reflection of what was really happening in places like Oklahoma and Texas. They did so without explanation, and it can be jarring, so you're watching a film and the cowboys ride into town, they get out of their saddles, they lash the reins around the hitching post, and they go into the saloon, and a split second later a 1936 Ford pulls up and a couple of guys get out wearing suit coats and fedoras. So without explanation, so you're halfway through the movie and all of a sudden there's modern elements. The appearance of these automobiles is just it became a staple of not only Gene Autry and Roy Rogers, but a few other Western stars during this period as well. And you need to get used to that. Anyways, these Under Western Stars is contemporary to 1938. It's about the Dust Bowl and the ranchers trying to get federal help. Macintosh and TJ is contemporary for 1975. He's an old wrangler who picks up this kid on the highway and mentors him. Both are wonderful films. Roy Rogers, there's so much to say about Roy Rogers. If you get a chance, pick up this double feature 4K restoration of both of these films. Roy Rogers at the beginning of his career and at the end of his career. Wonderful material. So I'm just doing these in no particular order. It would be unfortunate if I were to forget to mention an Errol Flynn Western. He didn't make that many. But when he did make Westerns, and he didn't like making Westerns, he made good ones. I chose, oddly enough, people are going to be surprised by this, I chose San Antonio from 1945. This is a Technicolor Western, and it's charming, it's sometimes silly, it has some good action, it has the full Warner Brothers studio production values, and it has Errol Flynn, mid-40s, at his most charming. And that wouldn't last much longer. I mean, he always had the charm, but really Warner Brothers put out great films. Is it his best? No, these are not his. I'm not showing you these films. It's the best film that these actors made. Errol Flynn's best Western is actually They Died with Their Boots On, which is the most flamboyant, historically inaccurate performance of him as George Custer that you'll ever see. But what a beautiful, marvelous film. I like all of Errol Flynn's films. That shouldn't be surprising to you. But I picked San Antonio a lot. Really, you have Dodge City, you have Virginia City, where he co-stars with Randolph Scott. You have Montana, you have Rocky Mountain, Silver River, Dodge City, with Olivia de Havilland. That was his first Western, which is great. But I picked this one because it just has a certain old school Technicolor charm to it. Errol Flynn doing his charming routine as a frontiersman. Cool movie. All right, now we're going to go to, really, this one's probably controversial. This is a 1939 film called Frontier Marshal with Randolph Scott, Nancy Kelly, Cesar Romero. I think Lon Chaney's even in this. And this is the Randolph Scott version of the Wyatt Earp Tombstone story. Rarely do I see people talk about this film. It's just as good as any of the others. I like it. Cesar Romero plays Doc Holliday, and Randolph Scott is fine as Wyatt Earp. It's a black and white film. You can see, when you watch Frontier Marshal from 1939, you can see where the other films took their inspiration from, because the script is almost replicated in some of these other later films about Wyatt Earp. And if you don't believe me, watch this and you'll see for yourself. There's a lot more to say about Randolph Scott. I picked this one because it's rarely given any consideration, and that's the purpose here. I've chosen films that we don't normally talk about. Frontier Marshal with Randolph Scott. Gosh, Randolph Scott I could talk about forever. One of the greats. As Wyatt Earp. Great little film, 1939. All right, these are out of order, by the way. I'm jumping to 1966 with Incident at Phantom Hill with Robert Fuller. Robert Fuller is best known as the co-star of Laramie, which was such a great show. He later jumped into Wagon Train for 2 seasons, made a couple of films, notably The Return of the Seven, which was the sequel to The Magnificent Seven, where he replaced Steve McQueen. He's excellent in that film. People like to diss that film. They shouldn't. It's just as good as the first one. I agree, the first film, The Magnificent Seven, is a classic film, but equal to it is Return of the Seven. I like all of the Magnificent Seven films. There were numerous others. They're all worth your time. Anyways, Robert Fuller in 1966, he appeared with Dan Duryea, whom he knew very, very well from television. Dan Duryea shows up in some Audie Murphy films. Just fantastic. Dan Duryea was a great actor. An Incident at Phantom Hill from the mid-60s, 1966. A Robert Fuller Western, really good film. These are all popcorn movies, Get your bowl of popcorn and enjoy the show. That's all this is. This is the stuff, that I don't see people talking about. Of course, we have to talk about John Wayne. I picked Tall in the Saddle because people don't talk about it. It's a superb movie. This one was Tall in the Saddle. Tall in the Saddle was 1944. So, 1944, John Wayne makes this movie, and with Ella Raines, Ward Bond is in it, Gabby Hayes. It has all of the same elements you're going to find in the later John Wayne Westerns that you love, done here in this film as well as it could be done. Really an underrated gem from John Wayne's career. Tall in the Saddle, wonderful little movie. Now we're going to get to a really interesting film, Lonely Are the Brave with Kirk Douglas. Now, Kirk Douglas made a lot of... I have a piece of fuzz flying around here. Kirk Douglas made a lot of westerns, The Indian Fighter, and so many others. So what was this? This was 1962, black and white film. Kirk Douglas is on record as stating this was his favorite movie. It was based upon a book by Edward Abbey called The Brave Cowboy, which is somewhere on that bookcase behind me, along with other Edward Abbey books. This was really a heartfelt, superb, modern Western about a loner cowboy whose way of life is vanishing rapidly before his eyes. If you haven't seen this film, you should watch it. This is the DVD. I don't know if it's on Blu-ray. Probably. I don't know. But you can find it. It's just wonderful. Really a fantastic movie. Now we're going to talk about... I have to really get to... I really have to get to Night Passage with James Stewart and Audie Murphy. You know, between James Stewart and Audie Murphy, I could have picked a lot of other films. For Audie Murphy, I might have picked Posse from Hell. James Stewart, I might have picked Winchester 73. We all know these films. These are all great films that we're talking about. But Night Passage puts them together. It's not the best film for both, but it's a really good film. And guess who steals the show? Audie Murphy. You know, and James Stewart is great. You know, he was great in everything he did. But Audie Murphy, when they talk about openers in film, you know, the opening scene where the actor first appears, Audie Murphy is wearing black leather. He's on a horse, and he's galloping at full speed, and he has a grin on his face when he crests the hill and he looks down. What a brilliant opening for his brash, boyish personality. Audie Murphy, you know, people still to this day, they diss him because they don't think he was a good actor, and you're wrong. Audie Murphy was a great actor, and he was superb in westerns, and pairing him with James Stewart. Now, this was based upon a book by Norman A. Fox, which I have over there in the corner. I have actually 3 copies of it, I believe, in paperback. Norman Fox was a great writer of westerns, and one of his books he dedicated to Audie Murphy, a different book. But Night Passage was based upon the novel by Western writer Norman Fox. Generally faithful. You know, the movie changes things up. Great film with 2 of the greats. All right, now, this one is a 1953 film with Ronald Reagan. It's called Law and Order. I think I've mentioned this before. This is not a political statement I'm making. I'm talking strictly objectively. Reagan's career as an actor is often maligned by people actually in both political parties because they were, I think, jealous of him before he got into politics. You don't have to even think about the politics. Just watch his films. Law and Order is a 1953 Western and Technicolor, and he's great. And Reagan was good in everything, you know. He made 2 films with Errol Flynn. They're both superb, Santa Fe Trail and Desperate Journey. And in Desperate Journey, Ronald Reagan has a scene-stealing moment with Raymond Massey where they're in Germany and they get captured by the Germans. It's a World War II film. And Ronald Reagan double talks the Nazi. Superb. You can find that on YouTube. Just look that up. Look up Google Ronald Reagan double talking in Desperate Journey. Anyways, for Westerns, Law and Order, good film, you know. Come on, you guys. Give up the politics and stop being negative. Now, this is a film that I'm really quite fond of. It's a modern Western called Snowfire, starring Don McGowan. And it came out in, 1958. And it's a film about horses. And this is another one of those films where, you know, I don't know, you're a third of the way through it or maybe halfway through it, where an automobile shows up. Very, very much a late 50s film. Beautiful musical score. Don McGowan was an actor you've seen in a lot of Westerns and other movies. He was a great, great actor. This movie, this is really for horse lovers. If you're horse lovers, if you're familiar with any of the books of Margaret Henry and so forth, you know, you will love this film. If you're not a fan of riding horses, I don't know if you would like this film as much. It's not a traditional Western, It's a modern Western, and it's a family film, and it just has a certain feel and charm to it that I've always really liked. This film, by the way, has kind of a cult following for modern viewers who are discovering it for the first time, especially those with an interest in equestrian matters. They love this film as well. They should. So I'm recommending it, for a modern Western. 1958 with Don McGowan, The Wild White Stallion. What a fantastic movie that is. All right, and finally, to wrap this up, and I'm sorry I ramble on, I just had to pay tribute to the cinema of the West. We're going to end with Tim Holt. Now, a couple of years ago, Warner Brothers put out their archive collection. I think they did 5 of these box sets with 10 films each. This is volume 2, and I chose this one because there's 10 films in each of the box sets. And I have, I think, 4 of the box sets. I think there's a 5th. But in the volume 2, you get one of my favorite films, which you've seen on my wall. You've seen the poster on my wall, which is a half sheet for Brothers in the Saddle. And Brothers in the Saddle is... What was the year of Brothers in the Saddle? It was 1949. Now, Tim Holt is underrated. He made 40 Westerns, between the late 30s and the early 50s, before he switched up to some other things and then retired. These collections that Warner Brothers put out are really great entertainments. Brothers in the Saddle is one of my favorite Westerns. Not just Tim Holt Westerns. I would list it as among my top 25 Westerns that I would watch if I was going to have a Western film festival. I would include Brothers in the Saddle. It has all of the great production values that RKO was known for. The location photography, even though it's black and white, is really splendid, and you get that with most of the Tim Holt RKO films, especially after World War II. They're on location in various places around California and Utah, I think, and really works extremely well. And Tim Holt was pretty good, pretty stable, solid Western actor. Brothers in the Saddle, an underrated classic with Tim Holt. So there you have it, my friends. There you have a tip of the Stetson, and this is, by the way, a Stetson straw hat. A tip of the Stetson to the cinema of the Mythic West. Thank you so much for checking in. Thank you, Michael K. Vaughan, for thinking of me and asking me to host this. And thanks to all of those Posse members whom I mentioned. I think you all have wonderful channels and you're good people. YouTube is a learning experience. I've talked about that before, and I'm trying constantly to learn. And the people that Michael picked as Posse members are all diverse, wonderful people. So I look forward to next year and see what you people come up with. You can watch these channels that were mentioned all year. You don't have to wait for June. They're worth your time, as are all of the books they've mentioned and that I've mentioned, and these films. I hope you enjoy this little tip of the hat to the cinema of the West. Until next time, my friends, stay well, please. Stay happy and feed your beautiful minds. Read a Western.